And I love this one again. Kudos to the creative team, and Frank does so many things, and this is another one of them.
I mean, do we know who these hands belong to, or you know what? Never mind. It doesn't matter. I don't want to know. I actually don't want to know. That makes it better for me. So if I do come up with a joke, I don't feel guilty about it actually knowing the person. So
I don't. It's a good question because Cabernet does have delicate hands. So I mean, these are kind of elegant hands where I have kind of just fat old mitts.
Well, these are covering the actual whole pot, so I mean, these might be a little bigger. I mean, I don't know what his size is, but when we should do measurements like they do in the combine for size. Anyway, I digress.
we can do a little. I like that, like crime scene investigation on this. So what's great too is you've got a futures product here with $1,200 of notional. So the S420, which is a symbol, is $1,200 a notional, 21 stocks involved in the cannabis industry with names that a couple of them I didn't hear, but once I looked at, I realized how important they are in this ever-changing industry. And it's interesting. Tilray's there, Kron's there,
Aurora Cannabis, ACB, I think is in there from what I saw.
Right. And all names that are becoming very, very, important names within the space. And we looked at a lot of different ways to build this index, and there's a temptation to go down to some of those smaller stocks, but you're seeing those stocks either get bought up or go away. And it really begs the question, if you take a bunch of pink sheet stocks, what are you left with? Well, not a tradable item in terms of the underlyings change so much, and it really isn't relevant. So the right mix of, stocks that are traded have the appropriate capitalization, but are still really an interesting thing to trade. So margin here, about $200. So you're controlling about $1,200 for $200. And we're going to take a look at if we were to trade something like Tilray, the capital cost. So John, let's jump one ahead.
Now, I think you brought up an interesting point, this idea of what stocks are in the index. I know immediately that's something I thought about. That's what I think about all the time. When it's like in the situation of options and trading, and there's an ETF, always look to see what's in it. And naturally, this is an interesting situation too, to pull up and see, okay, what names are in there? And I think, the last time I saw data, we were talking about this. He was asking me what I thought about some of the names, and I saw some of them. Tilray popped out, and Aurora Cannabis, and I think one of the other ones you mentioned, I noticed those right away. And then we have some bigger names, which I think people need to understand. You got to have some things in there to stabilize this type of index. Right. I think we have Philip Morris and Altria both in there, and they have some different ties to, I think, different vapes and things like that. And so to bring that up, I know you guys have talked about this during the week. I felt like it was something I should mention too, being an person with these over-the-counter stocks. You can't really put those in there. And one of the people I've heard break this industry down the best is actually Ryan Grace. Ryan has talked about it before, and the multi-state operators and all of that crap. Honestly, there's a lot of stocks out there, but you can't fit them all in there. And so I think we've done a great job of putting the stocks that for now need to be in there to help make this thing, a reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting. You mentioned Altria, and you think, well, that really isn't, they're the company that is expanding their footprint into this space. They're the ones who are going to be buying those small little ones that we talked about and becoming an ever important piece to it. So it's really a great, you want an index that stays relevant and has some longevity to it. And it's important when you create it, you take those factors into consideration. So, and you mentioned, your journey with Tilray, a fascinating one to take a look at where this market has been, where it can go to. And, we look for diversification. All these stocks within here have been much higher and much lower where they're currently trading. And for me, that just continues to speak to, I need something that moves. Then I need something that's different than the other stuff I'm trading. And then I start to see how that fits into my strategies. And I'm just wondering, when you look at something that's volatile, how do you start to place that into, your strategies, your mix of products, your portfolio, Jermal?
Well, yeah, I actually snapped up a couple of Tilray shares a couple of years ago just as a trade. I think I have this and CGC. I don't even remember the actual
Okay.
CGC's name right now, but whatever. I had, and those were just the two that I was looking to play in the space. As you mentioned, it's an ever evolving space. Not only that, I earlier this year tried to trade a couple of iron condors in Tilray. I did kind of halfway okay, but I had to readjust a couple of times and moved
Right.
around a bit, and different things are happening. So, generally I do create, and I've talked about this before, but it always bears mentioning again. I create lists. So I've created, and that's how I kind of knew when Data and I were talking, I'm familiar with these names because I like to create lists and keep an eye on them from time to time and see what's going on with them. Do they really move? Sometimes you find a name that quote unquote may belong in a list like a cannabis list, but maybe not, like it doesn't move with the rest. And I like to see when stocks move as a group on individual given days. If they're all up big one day, they're all down big one day, that shows me what they're made of. And so that's kind of how I usually do with different things like this and how they move around. And then, you try to trade accordingly. If vol is high, you do try to, sell some just to see how it goes. But that's kind of how I view them all.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's a great synopsis of how you wrap these single names into your portfolio. Now we're talking about the ability to wrap in a group. And John, if we can jump one ahead, that'd be great. So correlation, it's an important part, both in terms of strategy. Looking for pairs, we like to see a certain amount of correlation when we trade pairs. We also like to see, especially when we're trading a portfolio of products. And what I mean is just a set. And, sometimes, we all start trading a single thing. At least that's the way I started for a number of years, just standing in one pit, trading one thing. Then we look to add products because we know there's opportunity and there is a smoothing effect that takes place when you start to diversify a little bit. When I look at a correlation like this to the equity indexes, I find this very interesting because I think when you look at almost everything, except for utilities, rarely do you see a negative correlation to the SPOOs or to SPY. But what you want is something that is not in that 90 to 100% range, or even that 80 to 100%. You want something that gives you back and forth, because we know all equities, as diversified as they are, as we go up, when they go down, they all tend to go to one. And here we're seeing within an up market and a down market, looking over the last 7 years, that this isn't something that in up moves and down moves, it has maintained its own unique kind of performance. And I find that hard to find. And I'm wondering, when you think about that too, where is the challenge of finding true diversification when we're looking through equities?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm, glancing at this chart, and I'm actually surprised that it's kind of relatively correlated to SPY. But yeah, I mean, this is interesting as far as, I'm sorry, you said, where do I find the challenge of, I'm sort of blanked out on this.
Oh, no, when you look at finding diversification in your portfolio,
yeah.
I mean, this surprised me too. And it made me really excited because I'm like, here is an equity product, equity index that comes with all of its capital efficiency, but truly looks much different than most of my diversified equity holdings. And I think that's a really important piece. So it's sometimes a challenge. I mean, the point being that in the up move, sure, we'll see things outperform, and then you see the correlations break down. But especially to the downside, everything tends to become it's not a pot size, it's an equity, and they all tend to kind of you lose your diversification via correlation. Here you don't, and I think that is a really important piece.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think that's, you want to find those situations where, you get that correlation. You want to be able to rely on a stock. You want to be able to at least have an idea of what it's going to do on any given day. And that's where the idea of correlation comes in, because when it's all over the map, you just really don't know. I mean, even like a situation like today, we've seen a lot of stocks that have a correlation to Bitcoin move lower. We saw that earlier today, right, because of what's going on there. So there's, to your point, when things go down, correlation kind of goes to one. And, sometimes it does change after that, after there's the quote unquote washout. Right. Sometimes things change, but you want to at least be able to rely on the correlation that something gives you. And it seems like here, we got pretty strong correlation. So that's pretty interesting.
We sure do. And John, let's jump to the last slide, because, we want something small enough that what I really like, and it's like our S2Y, it's $68. 2-year notes have had a huge move. Now, When you say huge, they've gone from 14 basis points to 27. In the world of yield, that used to be a rounding error for you and I when we would do math, figuring out the cost of carry of things. And in terms of percentage move, huge move. And at $68, that's a product you can inventory. And what I mean by it, you can expand your strategies. You know, it's not just looking for turning futures for 2 or 3 days. That's something, you know, if you think yields are, especially at the short end, are cheap, that's something you don't have to time perfectly. You can hold $1,100 cannabis futures, same thing. Look at the, you look at the potential here for huge swings on a percentage basis. That's a tremendous tradable opportunity. It's diversified. That's a tremendous tradable opportunity. And for me, it's small, so I can feel comfortable holding on to that and taking advantage of that kind of, opportunity. Because I think if we set this up and we actually built the slides in the reverse order, you'd look at this kind of swinging and think, I don't know if this is the right product for me. It may move too much. But when you actually walk through it this way, you really lay the groundwork of a small underlying that gives me diversification that is correlated to the equities world, which we'd expect. It is an equity index, but is diversified and then gives me elasticity. Lots of good things packed into this S420.
Yeah, I mean, and again, with this chart, people have to understand this is an evolving space. There's a lot going on in this entire industry. We already talked about, this is one of the bigger names, but there's a lot of other things that are going on underneath the surface. We talked about those over-the-counter stocks where they talk about the multi-state operators. The reason why we're not having those in this index is because those are a lot more volatile overall with their company and everything that's happening with them. So, again, this is this speaks to how much these things have moved. And of course, I mean, this chart, the big move, of course, that's eye-popping is from 2020 to 2021. We all know there's been a lot going on. So
it was a wild ride.
But there's a lot of opportunity. There's opportunity for movement, i.e. volatility. And I think that's the thing that piques my interest because, for the cheaper, $200, that price point as far as the margin for to be able to trade this, and this is just one of the stocks in it. I'm interested. Thanks,
Jermal. Thank you so much for continuing to take us all on this journey from options to futures and getting vested and excited about trading these products. So I will see you next week. I know you'll be seeing Frank on Thursday. And guys, stay tuned because Frank and I will be back for the latest edition of Splash into Futures. Have a great day.